We're now going to hear a short message from Kayla Cromer, a neurodiverse self-advocate and star of Freeform, Everything's Gonna Be Okay.
Being your own self-advocate is such an important learned skill and mindset in business and life. Especially in this era, open communication is needed at all levels. Speaking up for yourself is empowering. No one knows you better than yourself. Keeping a positive attitude, collaborating with others, and, above all, believing in yourself. Sure, you might stumble. That's okay. Pull out your tenacity and go after your goals.
What an important message that we should believe in ourselves. And this next panel is going to talk about some other ways, other than engaging directly with government, that we ourselves can stand up and make a difference. I am so honored to introduce the three panelists of our second panel. Gloria Medina, who is a former RespectAbility fellow and a trans activist; Ila Eckhoff, who is a member of RespectAbility's board and a professional at BlackRock; and also Ariella Barker, also former RespectAbility fellow and attorney for the city of New York. So each of you is coming on to talk about a different way that you have been, that you are engaging activists. So Ila, I thought I would first reach out to you and ask you to share with us the activism that you have engaged in, both the electoral work that you've done and also your work with our women's leadership program.
Thanks, Matan. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name's Ila Eckhoff. I am a managing director at BlackRock, and I'm also a founding member of BlackRock's Ability Network. I also happen to have cerebral palsy from the hips down, and I joined RespectAbility's board about 1.5 years ago. I had the opportunity in January to go with some other folks from RespectAbility to Iowa. This is not something I'd ever done before, and Iowa in January really wasn't on the top of my hit list, considering the weather and ice and snow, but we did it anyway. We put together a questionnaire on a variety of disability issues that we presented to all of the candidates, all of the Democratic candidates that we had an opportunity to meet, through attending their events and then speaking to them and asking questions in a public forum, as well as going to the offices for the Republican side of the equation, bringing and speaking to staffers there, walking them through our questionnaire, and asking them to complete, present their views and give the information back to us. We published all of those questionnaires on RespectAbility's website so that we could provide information, across the political spectrum as we approach the election in November. It was a tremendous experience. There are photographs, there's a tremendous amount of information that you can read. We were able to meet staffers, and it was an opportunity for me to do something that I had never done before and really get to hear our voices, presented by us. I think most of you have seen Ali Canto speak, and it's nothing about us without us, right? If we want the world to change around how people see disability, we make up 20% of the world's population. Imagine what we could do if we harnessed both our buying power and our voting power to make a difference. We could change the entire political spectrum. There's a lot of issues around that structurally to ensure everybody has access and has the ability to vote. But it's in arenas like this and organizations like RespectAbility where we can reach other individuals and get our voices heard. Another thing that we've done this year that I was fortunate enough to participate in is we created a Women Speakers Bureau. We did that in New York with roughly a dozen women. Zazelle, who you just heard do the voiceover for all of the Phillips exhibits that we've been here, is one of those people that's graduated from that program. And, you know, it's really been a very rewarding experience for me and just reinforces, you know, what I learned as a child. Luckily, I had a father who said, congratulations, you have a disability. You need to accept it. You may have to be better, smarter, faster at any given point to be looked at as an equal, but you're going to have to learn to stand up for yourself, you know, to be successful. One other interesting point, I read John Lewis published an essay over the weekend in the New York Times. And in that article, he says, stand up, and speak out. And he refers to that as good trouble. What I love about what we're doing here today, what we've been able to do all week long, what individuals like Jennifer Mizrahi and Steve Bartlett have been able to do both through legislation and connectivity and collaboration is really make a difference and allow us for our voices to be heard. So really thank you guys today for letting me be here.
Thank you so much, Ila, for your leadership in so many ways as we hear that, you know, the importance of speaking your voice out and also of engaging with the campaigns. I also wanted to bring forward something that Ila shared in prep that I think is so important, that, you know, she didn't have special preparation or training to go engage with the campaigns in Iowa. She was a concerned citizen that cared about the issues and was able to make a difference. And I believe that that is such an important perspective that she shared with us in prep that I just wanted to make sure was elevated as well. Ariella, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your role in the multifaceted SNAP campaign, where really there was just this amazing effort to make it so that SNAP benefits, those that were formerly known as food stamps, were available digitally so that folks with online so that folks with disabilities could get the food that they need. Can you tell us a little bit about that engagement and how you did that?
Sure, Matan, and thanks again for having me. It's a real honor to be on this panel celebrating 30 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The same year that that law went into effect was the same year that I lost the ability to walk. And so that law means everything to me and to the disability community in general. The SNAP advocacy campaign that RespectAbility began once the COVID-19 pandemic hit happened starting around in April and May. At the time, I had the opportunity to study at the Harvard Kennedy School. And so I was doing distance learning and actually studying and preparing and then taking my finals. And when those finals were over, initially, my plan was to go travel, to have some fun in those 2 weeks before my graduation, but it was the pandemic. So I realized I have 2 weeks and I need to use it to help my community. I had previously published an article at the Boston Globe on some issues related to the pandemic and saw how quickly it had effect. And I wanted to help RespectAbility with their SNAP campaign as well. So one of, as someone with a disability who is high risk and has to quarantine far more than those who are non-disabled and not high risk, I encountered the issue that so many in the community did, which was we couldn't access food. We couldn't go to the grocery store. We had to order our groceries online and have them delivered. And the first time that I went to do this, our I just expected, like any other time that you order groceries online, that you get that delivery fairly early. But in fact, it was because of the pandemic and the high demand, it was going to be 2 weeks, and I was out of groceries. And what do? So luckily, I had a community that could go for me. But a lot of people with disabilities, unfortunately, don't have that community. They don't have someone that could go to the grocery store for them. And those people with disabilities who relied upon food stamps in order to access food and to eat and to put food on their tables weren't able to order their groceries online because SNAP was not working with any online vendors to take SNAP. However, an online program was just started. So we at RespectAbility began to immediately have a campaign to get states to sign on to that pilot program for online so that people with disabilities could purchase their groceries safely. So I joined in thanks to the broad network that I built, not just in the disability community, but also within government officials, my colleagues at the Kennedy School, my professors. I was able to very quickly network with really important people or people who knew really important people that were in office right now. So that was the first thing that I did, but also we did letter writing campaigns where we were contacting every single SNAP leader in the country in every state and saying, this is a big issue. We need help. Can you please help us? Can you please sign on to this? And we also contacted and pitched stories to members of the press. And in doing so, used stories of actual people with disabilities who relied on SNAP and couldn't access food. And that ability to storytell and to connect the actual needs of a real person and to communicate that story was so effective in conjunction with the letters and the outreach that we did. We were able in a very short period of time, I want to say maybe 2 weeks, to have 90% of all SNAP family households to be covered by the pilot program. And now almost every single state is covered and has that and is a member of the pilot program, with the exception of some states that simply are unable to really utilize the vendors of Amazon and Walmart because they don't necessarily serve their neighborhoods. So just in a short period of time, with communicating real life human stories of a need that was so great at a really difficult time, had amazing results so quickly.
Thank you, Ariella, and thank you for the tremendous work, but also for reminding us that, you know, letter writing, that pitching to press, that there are so many ways to be involved. If walking into a legislator's office not for you, I want to take a moment to remind our audience that you can go to www.votability.com right now, and it will allow you, or maybe when our panel's done, and it will allow you to send letters very easily to all of your governing officials. Just by putting in your zip code, you can have the kind of impact that Ariella is talking about. Now, Gloria, can you tell us a little bit about your activism and your path to activism?
Okay, thank you, Matan. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, my activism with disability started with RespectAbility, and it was really something that I really appreciate, and I learned so much from at my time of RespectAbility. And after RespectAbility, I chose to focus on my last semester of school so I could graduate. And then COVID hit and the whole thing happened. For me, the activism in disability is realizing that I still have so much to learn, so much to grow as an ally if I want to continue to help in activism for the disability community. And that really starts with learning and like following the leaders of the disability community. Like I, for example, have taken the time to follow on social media various leaders of the disability community, like Charis Hill, Belissa Thompson of Disability 2 White, and others like the Black Disability Collective. And yeah, I think it's important that the best way to get involved is education and being a support to the leaders by seeing what they need and seeing like, do they need donations? What do they want us to learn about now? What do they want us to engage in and be a supportive voice in? So yeah, and it's like, and they also like following the leaders, they share stuff that we allies need to look out for. Like for example, the other day, Belissa Thompson shared an article on casual ableism that happens every day that we as allies don't really catch ourselves doing. Like for example, things in our language that it's just so ingrained into and normalized that we don't really realize that it's affecting the disability community. And we think it's just such a normal way of talking. Yeah, and it's.
Oh, can I prompt you just a bit?
Mm-hmm.
So it's so helpful that we got to keep in mind that one of the important pieces of allyship is to hear what others were doing. I believe you were also going to speak a little bit about how one brings intersectional identities to allyship, and also some of your activism around your trans identity. And so if you could make sure to address that as well.
Sure,
That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, the thing with trans activism and activism in the disability community tends to overlap a lot. As I noticed, as I was following a lot of leaders in the disability community, they were also had their pronouns in their bio. They also had gender identity and different sexual identities. And it's important because you can't have activism, any type of activism that is centered around the normalized, that is centered around white people, that is centered around cis people. It has to be an activism that enfocases all. Even in the trans community, the issues of disabled people tend to be discredited sometimes. And like, for example, gender bathrooms. I went to the University of Maryland and we had like, I'm thinking 3 gender neutral bathrooms. And they were very far away from each other. And that really doesn't take into consideration the mobility issues that a lot of people in the disability section have. So it's a huge campus, and we need to, in all our steps forward and all our progress, we need to include everybody and make sure that it's intersectional. And yeah.
Thank you so much. So I want to encourage the audience to put their questions in the question box. This panel is interested to engage your questions, wants to answer your question. I want to start by bringing up a question that was posed in the last panel, but that I thought was more appropriate for this panel. So I exercised some moderator's privilege, and I've brought it forward. And for reasons that will be obvious in a moment, I'm first going to direct it to Ila, although everyone else is, of course, welcome to join in. An audience member writes in and says that they are a successful partner in their finance firm, and that they are a person with a disability, and that they are looking for ways to volunteer and mentor and get more involved, and how might we recommend that that is done. And since you, of course, are also, have a very similar bio, I thought you might speak to that first.
Yeah, thanks, Matan. There's a multitude of different ways you can participate. What was very important to me, BlackRock talks a lot about purpose and about creating better financial futures for our clients. And 20% of the population has a disability. Well, that's 20% of our client base as well, right? So it's really, it's easy to connect the idea around inclusion and diversity is a very big topic now in corporate America. And I'm a firm believer in inclusion and diversity, but my D for IND is around disability. We talk a lot about gender, we talk a lot about race, we talk a lot about sexual orientation. I personally am very focused on increasing hiring and focus for the firm around disability. So there's a multitude of different ways you can do it within your own, obviously, corporate environment. There are organizations like RespectAbility that would love to have you volunteer. And the nice thing about RespectAbility is it really goes across. Although I have cerebral palsy, RespectAbility deals with every disability, whether it's visible or invisible. So it's a tremendous organization that can give you access and resource. Mentoring is a big deal. So for our ability network, we actually have a buddy list. So for everybody in the firm who's willing to disclose, like next to my name, it says cerebral palsy. So if you want to know anything about that, that particular situation, or you don't want to talk to your boss about having, a disability, or you're not comfortable disclosing, you can reach out to anybody within the network. There are other organizations like American Corporate Partners that deal with veterans. Some of those veterans could have disabilities, et cetera, that you can mentor in that vein. So there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm sure my friends, Jennifer and others at RespectAbility would be happy to collaborate with you and find what works for you the way they have to do it for me, so that I could do the kind of political things and the women's forum that I did this year that I had never done before.
Thank you so much, Ila. Do either of our other panelists, either Ariella or Gloria, have thoughts? I mean, maybe not as specifically focused as someone in the financial service industry, but other ways that you recommend that folks could get involved? And again, just a reminder to our audience, we have the Q&A box and we want to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that, growing up with a disability, also like this questioner with a mobility impairment, growing up, I never really had friends that had disabilities. I was the one. I was the only one, and like many people with disabilities, that I was the only one in a room with a visible disability. And whenever I did encounter people with disabilities, their disabilities were often so much different than mine that I didn't really understand how much we had life experience that we had in common, until the ability to have social media and groups online in which you're able to see other people's stories and relate. And I think that a really big part, if not the main part of advocacy, is educating the public and educating people that you're with. And because most people don't know the story of disability, most people don't know the issues that we have and that need to be addressed. And even though they most likely have a loved one with a disability, they may not, most likely, they don't know what their struggles are and what are the things that they find important, that they want. So I've found that the greatest ability for me to advocate is to go online and to publish, whether it's sharing articles that someone else wrote and that were published in a newspaper, or whether it's my own op-eds, to get these issues out, to educate and to share them, so that by you sharing it with, your 1,500 friends on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever, and those people then share it with their friends and so forth and so on, it creates a snowball effect and you're reaching very wide offices. But also another really effective way of advocacy, which has sort of a dirty name right now, and it shouldn't, is lobbying. We do it every day. It's a First Amendment protected right. And we don't even realize it. Every single time that you respond to do a text where you're sending a letter to your representative, or you're sending a fax, or you're sending an email, that's lobbying. It's called grassroots lobbying. And this is one of the most important constitutional rights that we can fulfill, to tell our state and federal representatives and local as well that these issues are important to us, that we make up 25% of the electorate, and that our loved ones and community make up 74% of voters out there, and that they need to take heed of this issue. And the more people that grassroots lobby their political officers, the more ability that we have to make an impact on them, because what they care about, possibly more than anything, including fulfilling their own constitutional duties to perform their own duties as a public official, but more importantly, to be reelected. And in order to do so, they need to, meet their constituents' demands. So I very highly recommend also engaging in some form of lobbying.
Thank you so much for that, Ariella. And I just feel like, and Ariella is also an attorney, I want to add the PSA that you need to be aware, however, if you work for an organization that due to nonprofit status or some other reason cannot engage in lobbying, then don't do that in your professional persona, but you can do it on your own time, all that you would like. And that will be just fantastic. It is definitely not the case that every panelist needs to answer a question, but Gloria, do you have anything you want to add in for this particular questioner?
Honestly, I don't think I could say anything better than both Ila and Ariella said. But I do want to say that bounce off what Ariella said about education. It's very important that we push for education, because I remember working in RespectAbility, there was a moment during National Disability Employment Awareness Month that we had to call governors and give them resources and education about what's going on with this National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and also ask if they were doing anything, if they had anything planned. And for me, that was definitely quite a moment to see the National Disability Employment ending was that ending was already such a, I don't want to say old, but it already had years being out there, and a lot of governors didn't really have anything planned for that month yet. And I think I was hoping that at least 25 out of the 50 governors we called would have had something, but they didn't. I think I got only like 10. So it's very important to keep educating and keep holding the people we hold, that we hold for office accountable.
Thank you so much. And it's so important to realize also, and I remember this when I was in government myself, it doesn't take very many messages before something is on somebody's agenda. That call from Gloria that those folks received, if they got that and maybe one or two others, that was probably enough to make it something at least that they were going to pay attention to and try to figure out, again, something that you can do very easily today by going to voteability.com. But now I want to ask, and I'm going to start with Gloria on this one, what is one other easy thing that each person on our call could do today to begin to get involved? I'm going to ask each panelist to give us one easy thing that someone could do to get involved.
I think currently during COVID, I think the most important one would be to donate to leaders in the disability community, even if it's just $10 or $20. I know COVID has gotten a lot of us unemployed and but already people with disabilities were already going through much less rates of unemployment before COVID even started. So I think it's important that at these times we donate to GoFundMe's and all this stuff to make sure that, you can't really have activism. You can't really focus on activism if you don't have your basic needs met. So yeah, I think donation, at least anything you can to leaders would be great.
Thank you. The importance of speaking by supporting those who are making it their work. Ila, do you have one thing that folks could do right now?
I think the best thing that we can do, and it's kind of what we're doing today, right? We're being open, we're being honest, we're talking about the reality of what it means to have a disability, and we're focused on all the things that we do. right? In order to change stigmas, we need to have people realize that people with disabilities are capable. First and foremost, when you see somebody with a disability and it's visible, obviously, rather than assume that they're not capable or what their limits are, assume they're capable until proven otherwise. And the way we can help change that is by constantly, whenever we see that's not the case, you have to speak up and speak out, right? We really need to stand up for ourselves, because once we stand up for ourselves, then others will stand with us.
Thank you. And Ariella, do you have one strong suggestion for how folks can get involved, engaged, and active today?
Yes, it's very easy. This year is election year. And what does that mean? A lot of politicians are out there talking, they're proposing their plans, they are being interviewed by the press. So I think, and I recommend, that every time you hear a politician or a member of the press or anyone really who is talking about diversity, who is talking about issues that relate to race, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, if they are not talking also about disability, call them out. That's it.
Call them out. Such good advice, such important advice to be heard. Ila, you just unmuted, which makes me feel like you have something that you
I just second and third that, right? Just second and third that, right? Speak up. That's what this is about. Call them out, right? We need to stand up. This is how we make a difference. So that when we get to ADA 40, it's a different world that we're looking at than we have today.
The power of our voices. Thank you so much for elevating that moment and that feeling. And, you know, I think also for elevating the importance of voting. You know, it's interesting. I keep referring you to votability.com because of the electoral contact tool, but as you might guess from its name, it also has on it fantastic information about every political candidate that has been willing to provide us that information, you know, and preparations for how to be involved in elections. It's updated as we get more information. We're, of course, completely nonpartisan. We simply want to make sure that folks are aware where candidates stand on issues. And I want to, in some ways, extend this question to the audience. And what do I mean by that? You know, I took a look at who was registered for today. And you're all an incredibly impressive group of people. Your leaders, your thought leaders, your organizational leaders. Any one of you could probably join us here on this panel if the Zoom could accommodate it. It would be a little weird because, you know, we'd have multiple screens, but it would be good. So if you have ideas, if you have things that folks should do, you can please consider us a forum to share that, whether you put it in the chat box now, whether you talk about it at our town hall later. We want to hear about the different ways that people can get engaged, because if there's one thing that we have learned and heard, it is the power of folks' engagement. And so I want to, we're just about at a close for this panel, but what I want to do is do one more round robin to give you each a chance at a closing message. What would you like to leave people with? I mean, it's almost, you know, you already said the powerful words about speak up and speak out. Let Gloria give us some closing words, then Ariella, then Ila, just to give an order. So Gloria, a closing thought for our audience. Gloria, a closing thought for our audience today.
I think the most important thing to take away is to keep things intersectional, to keep looking out for everybody when it comes to activism. Any form of activism, and to, you know, when you're talking about the trans community, about race issues or anything, always keep in mind the disability community as well.
Thank you. Always remember where the disability community fits in your activism, whatever your activism is, because disability cuts across every category. It affects us all. So thank you for that. Ariella.
Yeah, well, I guess my closing advice or comment would be, if you think that you would be bad at advocacy, or you can't do advocacy, or you just can't make a difference, you're just one person, a drop in the bucket of the entire population out there, and change, we never, you think change is impossible to create. I will tell you that you can create justice, you can create change. The wheels of justice are slow, but they work. But they don't work unless you get involved, you get out there, and you make your voice heard. So don't worry if you have no experience or you don't know what you're doing. There's really nothing to it. And if you need help, I'm available. We're all available. We want to help you help the community.
Such empowering words. You can do it. You have that ability. And most importantly, we're standing by to help you figure out just how the right way is for you. That's what today is about. And our panelists stand ready to help. Ila, any closing words of wisdom for our audience today?
Look, for anyone who gives you resistance to tell you that disability really doesn't impact them, I beg to differ. It may hit them when they're 95 years old. For any woman who's had a child, congratulations, that's short-term disability. You're already a member of the family. Disability affects just about everybody at some point in their life, even if it's for a short period of time, or for some of us that were born with it, we're kind of there. But it's going to affect everybody. So even if you're coming up with resistance, that person too at some point is going to have to deal with disability. Make it in their self-interest. One of those interesting things that'll happen is when it affects you personally, that's how people then get involved. So get involved.
Thank you. Thank you all for your breath of advocacy. Thank you for what you have done. And if there's one thing we can truly take away from these amazing panelists, it's that, both panels, it's that from engaging directly in government to with your government to all of the other forms of activism, there are so many ways that you can engage, and we all have the greatest power of a democracy. That's the power to vote, the power to make sure that the people representing us represent our views and our vision, to run for office, so that just like our chairman who has rejoined the Zoom call, we can be those voices in the halls of government. And so I encourage you once again, maybe a little bit like a broken record, to go to www.voteability.com. Use that voter voice to make your voice heard. Use the election resources to figure out how you want to exercise your sacred right to vote. And above all, please stay engaged.